What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another updated hero guide, this time focusing on everyone's favourite smuggler, Han Solo. Now, to be honest, Han really hasn't changed all that much since launch, other than a few tweaks here and there, but since I am going to be covering all heroes leading up to the new heroes that are coming in Season 3, I thought I'd still do an updated guide for Han, especially since a majority of you guys probably never saw my original guide anyway, since I only had around 80 subscribers when I made it. So anyway, in these guides I am going to cover both Galactic Assault and the Heroes vs Villain game modes as well, so I'll separate both game modes and touch on both the best star cards to use as well as the best tactics to use in each game mode as well. Before I get stuck into that though, I'll just quickly touch on Han's HP and abilities just so that any newer players out there can get a good idea of how he plays. So he starts off with a base HP of 650, which again is pretty much just the average for a blaster hero. However, he can only regain 150 HP, which is a bit lower than most other heroes. And due to the fact that he doesn't have any kind of health regen card, his health can be a bit of a worry compared to most other heroes in the game. Just like his health, his speed is pretty much the exact same as most other blaster heroes in the game. I'm not 100% sure if there are any stats out there for hero sprint speeds, but just from experience I can tell that he runs at pretty much the exact same speed as the rest of the blaster heroes, and even if there is a slight difference, it's definitely not enough that you can notice it. His weapon of choice is his iconic DL-44 that we see him use throughout the movies, and it's definitely one of the more powerful blasters in the game. Depending on your range, where you hit the enemy and also what class the enemy is, you'll usually get a kill in around 2 to 4 shots, and you can even get a one-shot headshot a lot of the time as well. But just bear in mind, it does have a slightly lower rate of fire to compensate for such a high damage output. So now moving on to his abilities, and I'm not going to lie, he does have a pretty lackluster set of abilities. They're not bad by any means, but they're just very situational, and oftentimes I find that I might go on a 30 kill streak without even needing to use some of them. In saying that, they are all pretty useful for their own certain situations, it's just those situations don't seem to come around all that often, at least in Galactic Assault anyway. So his L1 ability is the Detonite Charge ability, and this is without a doubt his best ability, and it's honestly probably up there with one of the most deadly abilities in the game, especially when it comes to Galactic Assault. As the name suggests, this just gives Han a detonite charge that he can throw by pressing L1, which will then stick to any surface as soon as it lands, and then pressing L1 a second time can cause it to explode and deal a massive amount of damage to anyone within the area of effect. This ability has so many handy uses. You can leave it somewhere near a choke point and then blow it as the enemies are running past, or you can even just use it like a grenade and throw it into an objective and blow it straight away. The area of effect for this thing is absolutely massive, and it's not rare to be able to clear a whole room just with this one ability, so this is one that you definitely want to try and use as much as possible. His L1R1 ability is called Sharpshooter, and this one is really handy for taking out enemy villains. However, in Galactic Assault it can be pretty situational in terms of finding a proper place to be able to use it. What this does is it just allows the DL-44 to fire rapidly for a few seconds, so it is good for taking out villains like I said. And it is definitely still useful in Galactic Assault as well, especially if you are trying to take out large groups of enemies or even enforcer classes and stuff like that. The only thing that you'll need to watch out for is that while the ability is active, you'll move at a much slower rate than normal, so definitely try not to use it if you're in an area without a whole lot of cover. His R1 ability is the Shoulder Charge ability, and just like I mentioned for the last one, this can be really useful in the right situation. It's just pretty rare that that situation will arise in Galactic Assault, and even when it does, I actually find that this ends up getting me killed more often than not. Now, as the name suggests, this will just send Han charging forward, and anyone in his way gets a good old hip and shoulder, as we call it down here in Australia. This was one of the few things that was given a slight buff since launch. It used to not always be a one-hit kill on regular troopers, but from what I can see since they gave it a slight buff, it's pretty much guaranteed a one-hit kill on every class except for the heavy class. As I mentioned before, this ability can be really useful, but you do just need to know when and when not to use it. If you do this in a hallway full of enemies, then you're pretty much guaranteed to end up dead, as the slow animation of actually hitting the enemy means you're pretty much going to be standing still in the open. So just make sure to pick the right time to use it and you should be absolutely fine. So that's pretty much all of the base tips covered. Now we're going to move on to some of the best tips to use when it comes to Galactic Assault. So to start off, I'm just going to go through some of his best star cards to use in Galactic Assault, and to be honest, he probably has some of the worst star cards in the game unfortunately. although there are still some cards that are really useful, so I'll try and touch on all the ones that are worth mentioning. The first card I'm going to recommend is his Airburst card, and what this does is it just makes the Detonite charge deal bonus damage if you blow it before it touches any surface. This comes in handy so often when you throw it into a room and need to blow it straight away before the enemies have a chance to run away. And the extra damage is going to help you get more kills with it as well, so it's definitely a card that you want to use on maps where there are tight corridors or small rooms full of enemies. The next card I'm going to recommend is his heavily modified blaster card, which pretty much just reduces the heat build up of his DR-44, effectively giving him more ammo for lack of a better word. This might not seem all that helpful, but those extra few shots before having to reload can really be a lifesaver more often than not, so this is definitely another card that's always worth using. The next card I'm going to recommend is his Sharpshooting Frenzy card, and this one makes it so that each kill you get with a Sharpshooter ability extends the duration of the ability. Fully upgraded, this is going to give you a 40% bonus, so if you can manage to string together a few kills quickly, then this can turn a pretty lackluster ability into one that allows you to take out a whole squad with ease. Now, honestly, these are pretty much the only 3 cards I ever find myself using for Han. There are some other cards that are somewhat handy as well, but I find that I just keep using these cards in Galactic Assault most of the time, as they just suit my playstyle a little better than any of the other cards do. Like I said, there are a few other decent cards to use, so if any of you guys do have any cards that you think are worth mentioning, then definitely don't hesitate to leave them down in the comment section as well. So now moving on to some tips for Galactic Assault, and the first one relates a lot to what I said at the start of the video about Han's health. He definitely is one of those characters that can seem to go down in just seconds if you do get stuck in a tough situation, so the first tip really is just to make sure you're not playing too aggressively while still trying to play your role in the game as well. Some people do seem to play Han a little too passively, which ends up making him even more useless than he would be if you ran into a room and got killed straight away. There are plenty of people out there that I've seen running around at the back of the map trying to snipe people and trying not to lose any health, which sort of just defeats the purpose of using a hero in the first place. You need to find the perfect balance between too aggressive and too passive, and if you can find that sweet spot, then Han can be just as deadly as any hero in the game. It's just a matter of finding that perfect balance, which is probably easier said than done, to be honest. For anyone that watched my Iden hero guide, that same sort of rule applies to Han as well when it comes to Galactic Assault. You pretty much never want to run into objectives without sussing out the situation first, but at the same time, heroes are also meant to help lead the charge, so if you do find yourself sitting at the back of the fight while your teammates are doing all the hard work, then you definitely need to play just a tad more aggressive. Make the most of the Detonite charge ability and try and keep hallways or rooms clear for your teammates, and then once they push in, you can help take control of the area and defend any enemies that decide to push in. Like I said, the DL-44 is extremely deadly, so if you do get yourself into the right spots and keep on the move, you can be a force to be reckoned with. So that's pretty much all of the tips for Galactic Assault. Now we're going to move on to some of the best star cards to use in the Heroes vs Villain game modes. So the first 2 cards I'm going to recommend are ones that I already touched on for Galactic Assault, which are the Airburst and Heavily Modified Blaster cards. These cards are both just as useful in the HVV game modes as they are in Galactic Assault, so I definitely recommend giving these 2 cards a try. For the third card, however, I definitely have to recommend replacing the Sharpshooting Frenzy card with the Broad Shoulders card instead. Sharpshooting Frenzy only works for each kill you get with the Sharpshooter ability, and since you're not going to be mowing down a whole squad in HVV or Showdown, then that card pretty much just becomes useless in these game modes. Its replacement card, Broad Shoulders, makes it so that Han receives less damage when using the shoulder charge ability, and fully upgraded, this actually gives you a crazy 40% damage reduction, which is really useful especially in the hero game modes, and it can help you get a few enemies off their feet while taking less damage of your own, so it definitely comes in handy in these game modes. Again, like I said for Galactic Assault, there are a few other cards that can be handy, so if you do have any cards that you think deserve a bit of a shout out, then definitely feel free to let us all know down in the comments section. So now moving on to the tips for these game modes, and honestly it's pretty much the exact same playstyle as I mentioned for Galactic Assault. In HVV and Showdown, you never really want to be running around by yourself. You should always try and stay close to a teammate, and then just try and be a bit of a support type of character wherever possible. The Detonite charge can actually knock enemies off their feet, so try and make the most of that so that you and your teammates can capitalise when the enemies are having a bit of a laydown in the middle of a battle. The same sort of thing applies to the shoulder charge ability. Timed right, this can knock anyone off their feet as well as deal a fair chunk of damage, but just also remember the slow animation time and try not to use it in a situation where you're going to end up regretting it instantly. So that's going to be it for our updated Han guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips helped you guys out, and if they did, then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel. Like I mentioned before, if you do have any tips of your own, then definitely don't hesitate to leave a comment and let everyone know. The more tips the better, so definitely feel free to leave your own tips as well. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.